911, what's your emergency?
Every week we're seeing new and undeniable climate events, evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now.
911, what's your emergency?
Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor.
911, what's your emergency?
We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections.
No one is available to take your call. Please leave a message.
Has the whole world gone crazy?
Nah, just your screwy country.
I now call on Paris Agreement, which is in the document that I call on you to adopt this. I see the reaction is positive. There are no objections. The Paris Agreement is accepted.
Well, the world finally agreed to do something about the global climate crisis, and it's like the mother of all 911 calls. But no one's answering it. No one's even talking about it, actually. Not in the mainstream media, all politics and terror. So we're going to talk about it, both the challenges and solutions, the leaders and the losers. We'll cover the extreme events and emerging technologies, all of it at Climate Talk Radio. And we'll build that huge momentum necessary for action to carry out the charge of the Paris Agreement. I'm Nancy Skinner, host of Climate Talk Radio, and I've assembled the best and brightest show contributors from climate scientists, climate champions, business and technology leaders, and yes, even bipartisan political leaders to get this conversation started. Welcome to Climate Talk Radio. Clap! Because we finally got this puppy going. Climate Talk Radio. Climate Talk Radio is taking its inaugural flight, its Virgin voyage, whatever you want to call it. Welcome to Climate Talk Radio. I am your host, Nancy Skinner. I am joined by our producer and call screener, Nancy G. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely can hear you. So can everybody else listening on Climate Talk Radio. Hey, folks, it's been a long time. You know I've been working on Climate Talk Radio and getting this show off the air for a very long time. The number to the program, let me give this to you so you can call in anytime. This is a live broadcast. Live over the air. Go to climatetalkradio.com and live shows, and you can listen live right there on my website or on Spreaker under Spreaker.com under Climate Talk Radio. The number to the program is 734-333-9020. So that's not too hard. 734-333-2020. No, 9020. That's right, Nancy? 9020.
Yeah, 9020. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the number of the program. You can call in. Nancy will be answering your calls on her end, and we could be talking about a lot of events that are going on in the country. First of all, I want to thank a lot of people who helped put this show on the air. So introducing my producer, Nancy Garling, who's been working on this project with me for a long time to get the show on the ground and off the ground, I should say. It's been stuck on the ground for a while. Because
I know.
The technology that's involved in doing a live caller-driven broadcast is enormous. If you're not like in a major studio, which if people know me, I am a veteran radio host. And so I'm used to just walking in the studio and all that expensive equipment is put together and assembled, and you have board operators, and you just pretty much are worried about your show. I've had to become a network engineer, a computer expert, any number of professions to be able to get this show put together, but we have. Roger Haggart, Nancy's brother, has been so helpful in all of this, as well as Doug Schiette. Is that how you pronounce Doug's last name?
I believe it's Sheedy.
Sheedy, Doug Sheedy, our
Sheedy.
audio engineer on the program, and Jim Leggett over at Senditech. So many people have been instrumental in putting this technology together. So there you have it.
Don't forget Nick. Nick can't pronounce his last name.
Nick, whose name we cannot pronounce. Yes, that's right. So it's 734-333-9020 to call into the program. Nancy, answer your call. But what I want to do is, because this is, this show is focused on climate change and this enormous challenge we're facing. And I really wanted to bring a show that that focuses on that, because it's really a non-issue in the mainstream media. And with this election, the stakes could not be higher for the outcome of climate change. I mean, basically because of their positions, not because of their party or labels or whatnot. We have, if you go to climatetalkradio.com, you'll see we have a fabulous all-star contributor lineup. Top climate scientist Michael Mann, and we have an evangelical climate scientist you may have heard of, Catherine Hayhoe. We have former Republican Congressman Bob Inglis, who was primaried out in South Carolina after 12 years in office because he said he accepted the science of climate change. So this is by no means a partisan show. It just so happens that in this election, Donald Trump has taken the position that, climate change is a hoax. He tweeted that out, made up in China, of all places. I don't know why. I don't know why he would pick China. But I do know why he didn't pick Russia. We'll get into that in just a moment here. And so he said he would kill the Clean Power Plan. Now, the Clean Power Plan is our contribution, the U.S. contribution to the Paris Agreement. So last December, 195 countries, the entire world, came together after 20 years of working on this and signed an agreement pledging to keep our global average temperature, and we'll explain all that kind of stuff as the show goes on with our expert, but to keep it below 2 degrees, preferably get down to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that means a whole lot because it's the global average temperature. And we'll get into the technicalities of what the science is. But there's so much more to this issue than just the science itself. Science is pretty clear, basically. It's been known for almost 200 years, the physics of climate change and what CO2 would do, a thickening blanket would do to trap in greenhouse gases. But what's been the problem for 20 years basically is right-wing talk radio and Fox News and others who oil interests that some of these phony scientists who have been out there on a deliberate misinformation campaign. That's what motivated me to get into talk radio in the first place back in 1997. Set the record straight. And so that's what we're going to do here. And that means that there's policy questions involved. Who we elect matters, makes all the difference in the world. In this case, Trump is a disaster. I'm sorry. There are some great Republicans. Actually, some of them, I think Kasich, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Kasich, I think he accepts climate change. I think so. I'm not sure of these political candidates, but certainly, there are many on the right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, on the right who have accepted the science and are saying, let's do something about it. A lot of conservative economists, Reagan's economists, are all for a carbon tax. We can go on, and we will, about the nature of this not being a partisan issue, because I talk about that a lot. I mean, it was Ronald Reagan who signed the Montreal Protocol, and he cited the global scientific consensus on climate change and the science behind it. And corporations, people came from all over the world, and we did something about it. They found alternatives, and they did. And they eliminated the chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. And believe it or not, now that was, I can't remember exactly what year that was signed, 87 maybe? I'm not sure, but there was a report that just came out saying that the ozone hole, which is, That's the problem. Has started to close, and they believe that it will be completely closed by 2050. Meaning, we have solved a global environmental problem before. This one's a little trickier, I got to admit, but nonetheless, we did it under a Republican regime. We can do it again, but not if Donald Trump is elected. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, has so much more policy in the pipeline for climate change than she discusses. Her campaign chairman is John Podesta. John Podesta was President Obama's senior climate advisor and has spent much of his career working on climate change. She is advised by top climate scientists. I know that personally. And so she understands, but she talks about renewable energy, empowering enough renewable energy to power every home in America. These are the solutions she talks about. Bernie Sanders talked about climate change a lot more so, really, but he talked about it in terms of the problem. And she talked about it in a different way. It's messaging, folks. I've been a politician. I've been a talk show host. I've had a lot of weird jobs over the years, but they are choosing to message it differently. Our number, 734-333-9020 at Climate Talk Radio. I do have our first caller. Roger's calling in from Troy. Hi, Roger. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Nance. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Well,
Just reading an article in the latest. Just reading an article in the latest Reader's Digest, and I'm glad to see this finally coming out. But it says the risk of climate change is real and warrants action. 90% of emissions come from the consumption of fossil fuels, and that is a quote from an Exxon person speaking to us earlier in the year.
And did you say Exxon as in ExxonMobil?
Yes, ExxonMobil is fessing up, and I guess many attorney generals around the country are going after them about their, leading the public down the wrong road. So it's interesting. It's finally out there. So that's a good thing. Maybe something might get done now.
Now, that may be because you probably have heard that LA Times first did a huge expose on Exxon. And they went through all of these court records and all kinds of documents and found out that Exxon knew that climate change would happen. They had their own scientific experts, and they knew, I'm thinking this went back to the 70s, okay? Somewhere in the 70s. And they actually used that information to plan their operations. So they would not build where they thought there would be, melting, like coastal things, or up in Greenland where they thought that there would be some sinking of land. They've used this to their advantage in their own business operation while funding this massive disinformation campaign. The memos are out there. I mean, everybody knows this. And I wish, it's just like the tobacco thing. I interviewed Michael Mann, one of the premier climate scientists in the world. You will be hearing that. That's also on our website, climatetalkradio.com. You can go get a preview of that interview right now on our fancy new website. And he said that the same players, some of these fake scientists that are always thrown about on my Facebook page, I have people saying, this Fred Singer and Bob Michaels, and I've known these names for a long time. It's like 10 of them, and but Michael pointed out in this interview that those same guys were defending big tobacco, the same people. So, when the tobacco conspiracy was unfolded and sort of blew up in their face, they just moved from that crisis to this one and are on the dole for climate change and became quasi-scientists for climate change. So maybe, now I think, yes, it's the Attorney General from New York, Schneiderman, who has opened an official investigation. It could be more. It could be larger than that. I just read somewhere into ExxonMobil.
There's a few of them now getting aboard, and it's kind of catching on across the country. So should be interesting to see what they do. It sure proves the point that there's no denying it anymore, though. And people can no longer say it's a hoax at all. So that's good.
All right. Well, thanks for calling, Roger. Appreciate you calling into the program, and we're gonna make that what you just said known loud and clear and across all the airwaves as we continue on our virgin voyage of Climate Talk Radio. I'm Nancy Skinner, your host. 734-333-9020 is the number to the program. That's 734-333-9020 to the program, so you can call in at any time. Okay, now, so I can't get into climate change, without addressing the politics surrounding it right now. Some breaking news that just came out today caught my interest. You've heard in this campaign for a long time that Donald Trump, people believe he has extensive ties with Russia. Obviously, he's, been calling Putin, a strong leader and all this nonsense everyone has been making fun of him for doing. And so he's denied. He sat down with George Stephanopoulos and denied that he had any interest. He said, would I sell condos to people? Yeah, maybe. But he's had no interest ties to Russia. Now, Russia is one of the world's largest oil producers. So you got, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Venezuela. Okay, those are like and then, a bevy of small Middle Eastern countries. Iraq, ironically, because of the Iraqi war, production was stopped for a long time because they were blowing up all the oil fields. But so here's yet another conflict, and a very serious one. This is the report that ABC did on how much more extensive Trump's connections to Russia are than anyone's reported and that he says. And it has implications for oil and what he would do as president. Listen.
A new investigation into Donald Trump's international business deals. Here with our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross. And Brian, you've been digging into Trump's ties with Russia, both here and abroad.
That's right, George, and good morning. Despite what Donald Trump has claimed to you and to others, an ABC News investigation has found his real estate fortunes have benefited greatly from Russian investors and their millions, potentially putting a get-tough U.S. policy with Russia in direct conflict with his bottom line. With his beauty pageants and his buildings, Donald Trump has been promoting himself to Russians for years, traveling to Moscow and other former Soviet states with his children. His daughter Ivanka posted these pictures on social media as she pushed the Trump brand in Azerbaijan.
I'm here in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Yet as a candidate, Trump has sought to minimize any business connections to Russia, as in this interview with George.
Will I sell condos to Russians on occasion? Probably. But I have no relationship to Russia.
But the head of a Russian-American Chamber of Commerce, Sergei Milyan, who says he worked on Trump-licensed projects, told ABC News there were extensive connections.
The level of business amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars that he received as a result of interaction with Russian businessmen.
Hundreds of millions of dollars from Russian businessmen.
Correct.
Trump made millions selling Moscow rights for the Miss Universe pageant to a Russian oligarch close to Vladimir Putin, with a man the FBI considers a top Russian mafia figure invited into the VIP section. The developer of a Trump-licensed hotel project in Toronto is a Russian-born billionaire. And Russian-language promotional videos attracted hundreds of wealthy Russians to buy condos in Trump-licensed projects in Florida, until U.S. sanctions cut off the flow. Now Trump says he's open to lifting those sanctions.
We'll be looking at that. Yeah, we'll be looking. Go ahead.
So he likes Russia because there's money to be made there.
He likes Russia because he likes beautiful Russian ladies, and he likes talking to them, of course, and he likes to be able to make a lot of money with Russians. Yes, correct.
Trump says there will be no conflict in dealing with Russia if he is elected, because his children will run his business in a blind trust.
He's still going to know
Sure.
what the businesses are, where they are.
We will
How
not
could he
discuss
not know
because
that?
we're not going to discuss those things. It doesn't matter. Trust me.
But a leading
Trust me.
Republican ethics lawyer says that does not solve the problem.
Well, I don't see how you have a blind trust when you know what's in the blind trust. The appearance is that a foreign government or other foreign organization has influence over the President of the United States.
Trump's lawyer tells ABC News that all this interest in Trump's business in Russia is overblown. The campaign says the Republican candidate has not decided whether he would or would not lift U.S. sanctions, only that he's looking at it.
So, Brian, the lawyer did not deny hundreds of millions of dollars in investments?
No, just that it's overblown, our interest in it.
Our interest into his extensive connections with the Russians and making hundreds of millions of dollars off them, including a major Putin buddy who is the mafia, basically, as reported in this ABC News report. That's overblown, our interest in that. And he's saying he's considering lifting sanctions off Russia. He thinks that's not any conflict of interest, let alone his entire fortune, and saying his children are going to take care of it. It's going to be in a blind trust, but he knows exactly what it is. I mean, it's a joke. And he goes after Hillary Clinton nonstop about the Clinton Foundation, which saves lives, gives malaria drugs, anti-HIV drugs out to people. Wow. One meeting might have been set up with a friend of theirs they already knew and worked with. Like, that's as much and as far as they ever got. There was no policy affected ever by any of this. So, you know, the mainstream media has spent so much time in the Clinton Foundation because that's what the Trump campaign has wanted them to do. Now, all of a sudden, you look at the Washington Post has done some really extensive reporting about his foreign entanglements all over the globe with really bad guys. And a lot of them are, you know, because their partnerships, they're secret. Really bad guys. And how many people have really heard about this in the mainstream media? Our number to the program, 734-333-9020. Nancy, had you heard about, like, this, how extensive Trump's ties to Russia have really been? Anywhere on mainstream TV, say?
No, really, I haven't. You know, if anything, I read articles on Facebook or Twitter. Paul Manafort, he was his, campaign manager? And I thought I read something about him having ties.
He worked for the Ukrainian, Ukrainian opposition party. So, yeah, he's a Putin guy. Worked for him, literally. And they didn't disclose that and made tons of money doing so. So, and then you'd think if Paul Manafort, who worked for it's actually against Western forces, and made so much money, you would think that he would have at least briefed Donald Trump on the basic issues of the relationship between the Ukraine and Russia. But Donald Trump didn't seem to realize that Russia had already annexed Crimea, that they had already invaded it. Because he was in an interview one time saying, well, they haven't done that. They haven't done anything, so we'll see what happens. Well, that's when, I forget which interview that was, but enlighten me, 734-333-9020. But that's the basic point. I mean, he doesn't know about the world. And you've had a lot of U.S. military people come out and say, you know, Bob Gates, former FBI director under, I think, H.W. and President Obama, did a lengthy interview and just said he's irredeemable because his lack of knowledge about the world. I mean, so many generals have come out against him and, you know, because he doesn't understand the world.
Yeah, but nothing but changes his base. His base just goes along with everything. It's like nothing will change their minds.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the conclusion I have here in this election is that just you know, when every time he started out saying something outrageous, like I could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen. That's a deal breaker. When he called on the assassination, basically called dog whistled out for someone to shoot Hillary, not just once, but twice now. Oh, that's a deal breaker. That's disqualifying. It just goes on. And so I don't know if this issue of his extensive ties to Russia and all these other bad guys and players across the world falls into that same bucket, because it really is a direct conflict of interest. One of the features of this show is that we are also able to go live with some breaking news. So I see CNN has some breaking news here. Let's just take a look at what's coming up. What's breaking on CNN?
Right. Fascinating and scary. But first off, what information did these hackers get?
Names, email addresses, phone numbers, in some cases security questions that you use to reset your accounts.
Oh, the breaking news is 500 million accounts.
A lot of other data about
Yahoo
500
accounts
million Yahoo users could be one of
were
the biggest
hacked
cybersecurity
in
breaches
state-sponsored
ever. Yahoo,
act. Now that would mean probably Russia, since Russia has, hacked the DNC.
This happened in
other forces, but it does say in quotes.
So Rico, some of the big tech blogs, Recode said Yahoo was going to confirm this, and then they have. But this came out a few weeks ago. This came out in August.
There were rumors about this a month ago.
But if this happened in 2014, is that a huge red light, a transparency question? Why did you not tell the public about it sooner?
It's the first question I have, and so far Yahoo isn't explaining that part. They say they only recently became aware of the stolen information, and so they figured out what happened. But it's awfully embarrassing, sort of on top of the other embarrassments that this happened 2 years ago.
Okay, so that's the breaking news on CNN. Now, do you have a Yahoo account, Nancy?
No, I don't.
Good. I don't either. But the point is, the scary part there is that they're saying it's state sponsored, so that has to be Russia. I mean, Russia is the one that's hacking it into all these things. And yet another reason why I think it's unacceptable for Donald Trump to embrace him so much. That
definitely, yeah.
They're hacking.
It worries me for sure.
Well, and then there were some reports as well that there are concerns that these Russian hackers may also be able to get into states, like state voting equipment, because some of the states they are plugged in to the internet through electronic voting. So and we know they've been trying to interfere with the U.S. election. And then we know that they're good hackers and they're hacking everything. So why should we, not be on guard that they would actually go into states and like machinery and fix the vote the way they want it? After all, Donald Trump just said he might lift sanctions on Russia if he's elected. They're doing everything they can to get Donald Trump elected. All right, so besides the fact that Donald Trump believes that climate change is a hoax, Russia, that is their number one source of income, is oil and oil, exports across the globe. So obviously there could be another reason, not just lifting of sanctions or some sort of favorite treatment, but they could be supporting Donald Trump because of and this is not even. I'm surprised the mainstream media hasn't really seriously talked about this or brought this out to light. It may be that Russia is supporting Trump because he's not going to do anything about climate change. So the status quo of oil production will continue. And they know that Hillary Clinton is being advised by climate scientists. And the bottom line, folks, is what the scientists have said globally, okay? Not the quacks, globally, is that we have to keep much of the fossil fuels, the oil and gas that is in the ground, has to stay in the ground for us to meet this limit. In a few weeks coming up here, I saw an ominous report. The scientists are going to an observatory in Hawaii where they measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the haunting number has always been 400 parts per million. You may be familiar with 350.org, the organization founded by Bill McKibben, who is also a contributor to the program. Wonderful, huge. They put on the People's Climate March back in 2014. I led the Detroit Climate bus to that march from Detroit to New York City, where 400,000 people, we expected 100,000, Nancy, and 400,000 people got on this bus and showed up to protest before, it was right before the UN was assembling to talk about climate change. And part of my show open, if you heard it, was Leo DiCaprio was speaking to the UN about the importance of this issue. So, tying things together here, Russia doesn't, they might have signed the agreement, and then they did sign the agreement in Paris, by the way. So did Venezuela. So did Saudi Arabia. So did all these countries. Really, no one held off. We have now, China did. We have President Obama and the leader of China ratified, meaning signed the agreement together about 2 weeks ago. In a joint press conference, because those are the two largest emitters of greenhouse gases, but they did it symbolically. And China has started deploying massive amounts of renewable energy technology, all kinds of wind and solar across the entire country, because they understand the dynamics here. And guess what? They're going to beat us to the punch. They're going to get the cost of manufacturing down, and then they're going to be the world's leading exporter of renewable energy technologies. And once again, like we got caught by the Japanese when they made better cars than we did, we're behind the 8 ball because of this. So there's many, many issues here to talk about. 734-333-9020 is the number to the program. 734-333-9020. Our Virgin Voyage. It's actually our test demo to see if all this technology works out together. Seems to be so far. Let's take a break, and we'll take some calls, and we'll also move on to some more information that's coming out. It's more and more news every day.